Hi everyone, thank you very much for coming. My name is Matt Martin. I'm a photographer, curator, self-publisher, run a small gallery, and I'm just going to kind of tell you a little bit about my personal work and the stuff that I go out and photograph, and a little bit about what we do with the Photocopy Club and Doom Gallery. So for this time I'm going to try and do, normally I have notes, or normally I completely read from a script kind of thing, so I'm going to try and do it as much kind of fluid as possible and see how it goes. So basically I started kind of getting into photography when I was about 16. I grew up in a small town down in Devon called Exeter, and I kind of started doing photography at college. I started doing like a media studies kind of thing for about a year, but I really hated it, and for 2 weeks during that course I got to do a photography kind of thing. So we were allowed to go in, do the darkroom and stuff like that, just to kind of see if we liked it, and I just completely fell in love. Like, it was just the best kind of thing. So I dropped out the media studies course and ended up doing 2 years. I think it was just like a GNVQ or a foundation, doing a very kind of standard kind of college style photography course. But it was kind of the best thing. I just really, really liked it. And at that kind of time, I was also really sort of into graffiti and punk rock, and that was kind of what my teenage years were kind of growing up on. Exeter has a really great music scene, especially evolving around punk music. So the local venue, which was called the Cabin, was where I would go and take pictures, and the guy that owned the Cabin was a big photographer, and he used to document all the bands that would come. And so I very much kind of had photography kind of happening around me, at sort of the things I was into. And with graffiti, I really wanted to be this like professional graffiti artist, and maybe end up being an illustrator or something, but I just wasn't very good at it. So I would just take pictures of my friends doing this stuff, and then I would blow them out on big photocopies and would wheat paste them around where they would also be spray painting. And so that kind of whole early start with kind of Xeroxing and zines and photography really, kind of kept going throughout my work, and trying to link that early stuff and trying to make a professional kind of career in a way, but still using that kind of punk rock kind of style within my photography. So I'm just going to sort of show you, first off, one series on my website, which is basically just Untitled Photographs, and this kind of gives you a view of the kind of photographs that I kind of started making in those kind of early years. It's very, how's this going to work? It's very point and shoot, very sort of snapshot. After college, I managed to get a job in a Snappy Snaps, which is just like a small high street lab. But what was great about that was I just kind of had endless resources in terms of film and printing, and I became sort of assistant manager, so I could lock up the store, and I just spend a few hours after work just printing all my stuff. And what you can kind of see here in those early stages of sort of zine making, I didn't really know how to make a zine, so I would just print off sort of 6x4 or 6x9 photographs and then staple them together and kind of make that into a kind of book. This before I kind of knew anything about like InDesign or Photoshop or that kind of thing, but from the working in Snappy Snaps I kind of got a kind of general gist of that kind of stuff over the years. And I was kind of lucky that I kind of, when I was at college, I kind of, digital stuff kind of hadn't really started to come in that. Yeah, everyone was still shooting film. We still had a darkroom in the uni. So that kind of, DIY kind of process was still very much active within the school system, probably compared to what it is now. So this sort of work that you see here is a mixture of kind of film and digital work spanning from 2006 up until kind of present. And I shoot on a variety of different cameras. I kind of have small sort of point and shoots, and then sort of a mixture of rangefinder kind of cameras. Pretty much everything is kind of 35mm, or if it's digital, it's a kind of rangefinder digital camera. But it was all just kind of about documenting being that kind of age, it was just more taking pictures of friends, what we got up to, places that we went, the scenes that we were in. Everything kind of evolved around skateboarding and music, and just exploring the world at that kind of age. And especially in Exeter, it's kind of a very small town, but it's very kind of it has very sort of parts that are kind of disused, and places to explore and buildings to climb. And I was friends with a group of young guys who all kind of started squatting this local primary school that had closed down, and we kind of turned it into our kind of playground for a few years, until they got taken to court by the council, but they managed to they really studied it, these kids. They were like a group of maybe sort of like 16, 17, and they were living in this school when the council were trying to kick them out, saying that there was like asbestos and stuff like that. But these kids just did their research. They like read every book and like looked up online and really sort of built this case around why they could stay there and the reasons for it. And they took them to court, and they walked in, and the council gave their speech and these kids gave their speech, and the judge was just like to the council, look, come back in 6 months when you've got a better case about it, because these guys know what they're talking about. So they managed to stay there for quite a while, and I kind of tried to document sort of that as much as possible. And so my work's just kind of grown over, I guess you can kind of sort of documenting kind of youth culture and music and that kind of thing. And then from Exeter I moved to Brighton, because Exeter didn't really have kind of an avenue in terms of becoming a professional photographer. I'd be making these little zines, and I'd be sending them out to magazines and photographers that I liked in London. And when a magazine would be like, hey, can you come and shoot this portrait thing or shoot a band for us? I'd be like, yeah, I'd love to. And they'd be like, where do you live? I'd be like, Exeter. How far away is that? 3 hours, but I'll get on a train. And they're like, no, we're okay. We need someone that kind of lives here. So I was like, okay, this isn't working out. So after a couple of years of working in this Snappy Snaps, I was following a photographer on Flickr who was a kind of fashion and graffiti kind of photographer who was based in Brighton. His name was Kevin Mason, and he had a photography studio called Garage. And what I really liked about Brighton was they kind of had this really fun young scene, and there was a group of maybe like 10 to 15 kind of young photographers who were kind of the core middle group of this scene, and I'll be following them online and seeing what they were doing, and they were all shooting portraits and fashion and stuff like that, and I was like, that's kind of where I need to go. So I moved up to Brighton, and in the first kind of week I walked into the studio and said, like, back then everyone kind of had alias names, so like on Flickr you'd be like, mine was I Am Lucky and his was Dark Days, so everyone would, it's kind of like now with Instagram, you're like, no one really knows anyone's real name. They're like, oh, I'm Thingy on Instagram, so it was like, hey, I'm Lucky Gold Teeth on Instagram, whatever. So it was kind of funny in that kind of way, and I just walked in and was like, hey, we've spoken online before, can I have a job? And he was like, no, we don't really know each other, but if you want to hang around, today we're shooting this fashion shoot. So I just hung out for the day, swept up at the end of the day, hanged out with the assistants, and then I got a job in a shoe shop. I think I did some telesales stuff for a bit, but every part of my day off I would just go to the studio and make tea and paint the floors and sweep the floors and just hang out every minute that I had off. And after about a year of doing that, me and the guy, we pretty much became sort of best mates by that point, gave me a job as his first assistant, and then I kind of worked with him for 2 years in a bigger studio that he opened. And around that kind of time was when I had started sort of moving what I had been photographing in kind of this youth culture and sort of documenting friends. And obviously as you kind of get older, those kind of situations that you find yourself in start to disappear. So you have to try and figure out a way to, move your photography forward into something that you can maybe base a career around. So using those same kind of rules that I had learnt with documenting like bands and, friendship groups and stuff like that, and trying to move that into more of a kind of stronger sort of fashion and portraiture way of working. So this series kind of shows you some kind of things that maybe kind of span from about 2011 up until kind of more recently. And it's just a collection of sort of portraiture work and a mix of kind of fashion bits that I'd shot around that time. And so I became this first assistant for this guy, and we sort of worked together for a couple of years. And then we opened up a gallery within the studio that he was running in Brighton. So that's kind of where the progression into sort of curation and that kind of thing expanded. But I'll kind of go into that a little bit later. So portraiture stuff, I really like taking pictures of people. And I think when I was younger, I, for some reason, didn't really have any kind of fear of taking people's portraits, but it's slowly, as I've got older, kind of stopped. And I've slowly got more wary of being rejected, maybe, or like asking someone to take their picture and then being like, no, I'm alright. And if that knocks, then I'm just kind of out of it. But going back maybe sort of, maybe like 3 or 4 years, kind of that Brighton kind of time, I was like, everyone that I saw would be like, hey, can I take your picture? Hey, let's meet up, let's take this. And slowly in the last kind of, I don't know why it's kind of happened, but my work's kind of slowly progressed more into like landscape and that kind of thing. And it's like, why is this happening? Because I love taking pictures of people, and I don't know why this fear or anything has come from. This is one picture from a series that I shot called The Young Ones. And at that kind of time I guess, kind of like putting eras by like Flickr and Tumblr and Instagram, but like I guess the Flickr era, I had this really great community of photographers who were all around the similar age that were dotted all over the world. And I did this project called The Young Ones where I just basically went up, contacted all these people, and would go and take their portrait. And it was trying to sort of document people that I thought were eventually going to become, sort of very, well respected and established photographers. And this was all shot around 2010. And pretty much all of them are still shooting, still shooting for like big magazines, still sort of getting big editorial things. There's maybe only like a couple that maybe aren't taking pictures anymore. But I spoke to one of the guys the other day, Chad. I don't know if his picture's in this series, but and said, because it'd been nearly 10 years since shooting those ones, and I was like, oh, maybe he was like, oh no, wait a lot longer, because you'll just see that middle ground where everyone's just slightly more haggard than they were, but maybe wait another sort of, that's Chad actually, yeah, he was like, maybe wait another kind of 10 or 20 years and then come back and shoot it all. But it is interesting seeing how much kind of people change within that small period of time. So from this kind of portrait series, I started doing, sort of moving again sort of into a bit more sort of documentary kind of stuff. Portraiture work kind of slowly started to drop off, but I was always kind of making zines. And I was really into using kind of photocopies and stuff like that throughout my work. And when I was at Create, we started a small sort of publishing company called Create Publishing, and we started publishing zines for sort of local photographers in the Brighton area. And before, when I was based in Exeter, me and a good friend always wanted to try and put up these little kind of pop-up exhibitions. So we'd like ask landlords and stuff if we could borrow, have their space for a day and put on little art shows and stuff like that. And not trying to be like back in our day or anything like that, because it's not really that long ago, but there wasn't really a thing of like pop-up shops like there are now in London. There's like so much of people having a space for a day and putting on a show, but 10 years ago it wasn't really heard of, and going up to a landlord and being like, hey, I want your shop for a day to you'll just use shop for a day to put on an art show, especially in the southwest of England. It's not really something that people really understood. And Exeter didn't really have much of an art scene. But we managed to get the local shopping centre gave us an old carpet shop that had closed down, and we did an exhibition that had sort of photography, like music photography and stuff like that. So I really kind of got into curation, and I'd started a website called We Are Lucky, which was basically just a Tumblr. But what I would do is I'd contact photographers and just ask if I could feature their photography on the website, whether it's just one image. But what was kind of good about that kind of early time of Tumblr, because there hadn't really been that thing of like reblogging, or, you know, you always felt that you had to ask permission. And what was really good about that was it meant you built these kind of connections to all these different photographers, and you could email them and be like, hey, I run this website, and that from that you just built this kind of network, and that's where we all kind of grew from. And so when I kind of got offered this space in Brighton to do kind of become a kind of more curational figure, I think that's when kind of curation kind of took a main interest in something that could maybe be a career to run alongside photography. There was a photographer that I did some interning for a little bit called Tim Barber, and he used to run a website called Tiny Vices, which was kind of ran in a similar vein. It featured lots of different photographers, and he was also a curator and a fashion photographer and stuff like that. So I was like, maybe that's kind of the route to kind of go down. And so around 2011, I started a project called the Photocopy Club, which I'll show you some examples on here of the kind of how it looks. And the idea was that we were always kind of broke, and there was never really a way of putting on an exhibition cheaply. And you always have these big kind of photography competitions or things that you can submit to, and there's always a high fee, or you always have to get sort of like nice Caesar type prints done and you don't get them back and that kind of thing. And there wasn't really any kind of exhibition submission projects that were happening that were affordable, especially to me and, you know, my group of friends. So I was sat at home and I was kind of thinking about a way to put on these exhibitions that would be really affordable for the photographer, myself, and affordable to kind of keep running on a kind of monthly or bi-monthly basis. So this idea of doing a thing with Xeroxes, which I'd kind of always used, just seemed to kind of fit really well. So in 2011, I started the call out for this project, the Photocopy Club, and the idea was that you would send... when we did the first one, it was you could send as many as you wanted, but it had to be a black and white photocopy with your name signed and dated on the back, and you posted it to our address. And the idea was that we would do a one-night exhibition where everyone who came could buy the prints off of the wall for £5. So the idea was to make one-off good photography affordable for people to also buy, but also people to be involved, and that kind of way it would all kind of come together. So when we did the first call out, which was December 2011, and we did the exhibition in Brighton, we received about 300 photographers submitted. So it just kind of flew. Like, we put it online, hadn't really like come up with a logo or anything like that, and the idea just kind of, you know, went off into internet space. And every day I was just getting more and more packages, and there was one point where the postman just came in with the whole sack, just like full to the brim, and we couldn't believe, like, it was like Christmas every day. We couldn't believe how much it was taking off, and like weird people were coming out and asking, like Nokia got in touch about something, and then like we were featured as like the top 10 exhibition to see in Grazia, and like just these weird kind of things that I just didn't think would ever happen. And so after the first show, the idea was that we were going to do six exhibitions between Brighton and London. So the first one was in Brighton, and then we went to a place called Beach Gallery, which was on Cheshire Street, which was just around the corner. They've closed down now. And that's where we had our first London show. And I've never done an exhibition in London at that point. I think I maybe had a small solo show in like a room above a pub, but this was kind of the first kind of big thing that we were really pushing, and it was a small space, but it was rammed. Like there was like a queue down the street. All the prints were pretty much sold. Like everyone took them at the end of the night. Really great success. We'd ended the next one in Brighton, and then we came back to London, and we did it at 71A Gallery, which is on Leonard Street, I believe. It's part of Huck and Church of London's kind of package that they have there. And it was just building and building and building. We were getting more and more submissions, and we sort of narrowed it down a bit. So we asked people to send like between 1 and 3 submissions, because people were getting a bit crazy and sending us like 500 photographs, and it's getting a bit kind of mental. And then we did the 6 shows, and I didn't know whether to just like knock it on that, like leave on a high point or something like that. But it was something that I really thought. We'd always get these little notes that came in the package, in the submission, being like, "Hey, thank you so much. This is like a rare project and stuff." And like, so getting that was just like really inspiring, and like, oh no, we should definitely keep this going. So from that point, we moved on to doing themed exhibitions. The images that I'm showing you here are from a show that we did in Berlin. This wasn't themed, but this was kind of our first exhibition that we did. I believe that we did outside of the UK. Again, I always say we, but it's me doing it. But I say we because everyone who submits is, I can't do it without the people that submit.
Was that local German photographers there?
No, this was still international people sending. That was another crazy thing, is that like work was coming from everywhere. We had stuff from like India, South Africa, the Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, like every country stuff was coming from, with all these really beautiful personal notes, and all the envelopes were designed differently with like stickers and painting and stuff like that. So the envelopes were so good that we started exhibiting the envelopes as well as part of the show. And I'll show you a video of so this is a show that we the first kind of themed one that we did was called Xerox and Destroy, which was all about skateboard photography, which was really good. And that's where I kind of got introduced to Doom Gallery. I was still living in Brighton at the time, and my friend told me about this gallery that I'd found that was like in a basement and really kind of punk rock and stuff, and I was like, wow, that sounds amazing, let's ask to do the Photocopy Club there. So we did this Xerox and Destroy show, and then the second show we did was called Riot. So I'll show you this video. It kind of shows you how we kind of set it up, and the kind of how a kind of night kind of works. So yeah, it kind of gives you a little kind of gist of what an average kind of exhibition kind of looks like. But what was interesting about that one was it was kind of like going back to the early years of like Life magazine, because it was when we were doing the Riot one, it was when a lot of stuff was happening out in Egypt, and what was amazing was that people were, out on the front line, like kind of documenting, real protests like happening like 2 days before the show, and they would, shooting it, putting it in an envelope, posting it out to us. So we had stuff that had literally happened like 4 days previous, like up on the wall, and we had Henry Langston from Vice came and did a talk, and Mark Valet, who's a sort of reporter and documentary photographer does stuff for The Guardian and stuff. So they came and did a talk. But it was really like, kind of those old times of when people used to, they'd be out in the war and they'd send their film overseas and a courier would take it and develop it, and you'd find out kind of what was happening a week later. So that's kind of what I really liked about that show, was it kind of took out the internet in kind of a weird way and kind of reversed people back to sending stuff by post and documenting it and exhibiting it in that kind of way. So from that kind of point, we started doing. We got asked to do more kind of photography festivals, and we did an exhibition that was linked with PhotoWorks, who organised the Brighton Biennale. And they were doing a launch of their new magazine that they started to go annual. So they did one called, which is all about family, which they did at Mother. And we did the whole theme. Was, I don't know if I have a picture of it in this series. Oh, there it goes. So it wasn't actually at Mother, it was at Jerwood. So this was all about family. You can kind of see the envelopes, some of the envelopes here that we exhibited. So I really kind of liked doing these themed ones, and it seemed to be something that photography kind of festivals and events seemed to kind of pick up on, because it was kind of an easy way of putting on a kind of a striking kind of exhibition, but again really kind of affordable and accessible for lots of people to kind of be involved in. After this show we did one for the Brighton Biennale on collectives, and that one was doing a joint kind of exhibition practice with a school in Johannesburg. So we had Brighton and UK photographers sent out to South Africa, and South African photographers came out here, and they kind of did this swap and documented everything. So we did an exhibition in Brighton, which was all by South African photographers, documenting their community, and then I went out to Johannesburg and we did zine workshops and stuff with the local communities out there, but from a English kind of point of view. And that was really fun, because I was doing a zine workshop with like kids who had never even used InDesign or been on a Mac, and I was just kind of showing them, giving them a real basic thing of InDesign, and they were picking it up like so quickly and like making zines. And then we printed out all the work and we wheat pasted them to this like motorway underbridge, which we got permission for. And it's kind of funny how stuff kind of goes full circle, how you could kind of, like 16 and like wheat pasting these pictures up around, and then like suddenly like 10 years later you're getting paid to kind of go and wheat paste stuff like everywhere and stuff. So it's kind of funny how that kind of turns around. And so the Photocopy Club kind of just sort of grew from that point. These are sort of some examples. This is the first show that we did at Beach Gallery, just around the corner. And so I was still based in Brighton while this was kind of going on, and the studio that I was working for closed down, and so I kind of had this kind of, it was near Christmas time, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I left the studio, left the gallery, so that was kind of all done. So I decided to open I had this really weird flat where it was just a doorway that went straight onto the street, and we had a really long corridor. So I asked the rest of the guys in the house if they wouldn't mind if I turned the corridor into a shop. And so I made this sign, like an A-frame, that just put out on the street, and then saying like zines and posters and photography and stuff. And it was a really long, narrow, like not any wider than like this bit here, and probably about this long. And then it would be the stairs. So I made a desk that folded out the wall, and then I'd sit on the first step of the stairs, and I'd have all the zines on shelves down this thing, and people would like see the sign, and they'd walk in, and they'd just be like in my hallway, and just be like really kind of spun out by where they were. But loads of people would buy zines and like kind of be interested. It was a lot of kind of sitting, and also like the draft. We were like right on the seafront, so the draft would like come up all the way to the house, and people would like shut the doors. We'd put a little sign up, like ring the doorbell and stuff like that. But so I did that for kind of 2 months, kind of wondering what I was going to do, and then Ken, who's the owner of who started Doom Gallery, put up on Facebook that he had a spare room going in the gallery. So I don't know if many of you've been to Doomed, but it's a basement space on Ridley Road. It used to be like an old children's clothing factory, and Ken's lived in this space for about 14 years, and it was kind of all open plan when he moved in. And when he first moved in there, it was just like full of like junk. Like he had motorbikes and fruit machines. And I don't think he had a shower at the time. Him and his partner used to wash like in a big bucket and stuff like that. And then he kind of was thinking about, kind of 10 years passed, and he's a digital retoucher by trade, and he was thinking about where can I show my work, and him and a friend was sat in the middle of this open space with all this junk around them. We were like, why don't we do it here? So they basically like built a wall down the middle of the warehouse and built 2 bedrooms, and then the second half of it is the gallery. And so Ken opened it about a year before I came along, and had done kind of a few exhibitions, as well as the Photocopy Club ones that we'd done here. So he put up on Facebook that he had the spare room going. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to move up to London. I'll move into this gallery, and I'll be like, hey, can I just help out and do the gallery? So we basically became this kind of weird team. Because, like, Ken's like 62 and I'm 30, so we kind of got this big kind of age gap, but strangely get on really, really well, and kind of have the similar-ish mindset on what we kind of want the gallery to be and where we want it to go, and the photography that we kind of want to show. So in those kind of 4 years, we've really kind of grown the space, and we do. I'll show you the website. Website's a little bit kind of crazy, but on a wide screen you kind of see everything. But we do exhibitions in really quick succession. So our exhibitions are only 1 or 4 days. We primarily started just doing photography, and we were at a point where we were doing kind of 4 exhibitions a month. So we'd either have like 2 one-day shows or like 2 4-day shows in a month. So they'd be really quick, really affordable. So we'd try and make it kind of a space that students and like up-and-coming photographers could hire. This is kind of a view of what the space looks like. That makes it look kind of narrower, but it's a little bit wider, and you can kind of see this kind of floor plan. And it was kind of similar to what I had in Brighton. So we started a publishing thing, and we were trying to support students, and we were doing talks, and we do workshops there. Ken's now started a thing with Anti-University, so we do this thing every Tuesday. Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday. Cultural Studies, which kind of is a small kind of study program, just kind of teaching people not just about photography and art, but kind of philosophy and just kind of a great way to kind of learn new subjects that you maybe couldn't afford to do if you wanted to go and do like a night course or something like that. So we try and be as versatile as we can be and try and sort of do all these different things. We've done exhibitions in Poland, and we've started doing this exhibition called Zine to the World, which is going to be at the Truman Brewery on the 12th of October till the 16th. And that kind of grew out of a similar thing of the Photocopy Club in terms of like an open submission project where we asked people to submit their photographic zines. And I think we've probably got about 800 zines so far that have been submitted over the course of about 2 to 3 years. And the first one we did at Doomed, and then we did it at a photography festival in Łódź in Poland. And the next one's going to be at the Truman Brewery next week. So that's kind of what I'm kind of doing now. Photography is still kind of travelling alongside that. When I kind of first moved to London, I was like, I'm going to go to all these magazines and I'm going to do this, and I started doing some like e-com stuff and some odd-fashioned bits. But London's such a weird city where there's just so many people to compete against, trying to be a professional photographer, and everyone's in the same kind of game in terms of like photography and fashion and music and stuff. So I kind of wanted to try and step away from that, and I kind of didn't want to be in the rat race anymore in terms of trying to sort of chase that kind of work. So I've been doing a lot of I really like going to America, and I really like doing road trips, and America has been documented to death, and the American road trip is kind of what every photographer has kind of done, and it's kind of hard to show that in a new kind of fresh way, I guess. So this is I'll show you this kind of images from my first kind of trip across the States. This was driving. The first one we did was going from Baltimore all the way down to Florida, and the next one we did was going from San Francisco down to LA, and then all the way across kind of through Texas and then back up to Baltimore. So this is kind of a collection of images from that trip. And it's very much sort of, snapshot stuff, sort of documenting the trip and where I was going. This is my friend Alex. He was another photographer, and but on this trip he had kind of stopped doing photography, and he just ended up doing this one project, which was him doing handstands like across America. So it was us just like, we'd be at like all these national parks and stuff, and we'd do these handstands and we'd take his picture. It ended up on the Daily Mail website because there's a weird time when the Daily Mail loved finding like niche, like funky photography kind of things. So he was featured on that. But I just kind of, he's just like a great subject, like he's an interesting character. So I pretty much was just taking his picture the whole time as we kind of travelled across the States. And this is the kind of work that I really enjoy shooting. This was kind of, a lot of this was shot on a FM2 SLR, and that was really fun, sort of reverting back out of that kind of automatic point and shoot stuff that I'd done, and really trying to be quick and considered. With the guy doing the peace signs at the Grand Canyon, I shot 2 frames of that. And the first one, his arm's just not straight enough, and the second one it is, and stuff like that. And just having that kind of fun experience of winding on and getting everything in focus rather than just point and shoot and kind of snapping away. So this was kind of first time that I'd really sort of used a SLR and the kind of stuff that I've been shooting, which was really fun to sort of be a bit more considered in terms of the stuff that I'd taken. But yeah, this is going right across sort of the bottom of the States, Texas and Grand Canyon and all that kind of stuff, Baltimore. And so the next kind of trip that I did, again, kind of going back to what I said before about having this kind of fear of starting to take pictures of people and stuff like that, and wanting to kind of get more into documenting kind of landscape kind of work. And so this was the first part of this project, which was called Xerox America. There's a zine as well somewhere around that also shows this. And this is where I kind of got more kind of involved in sort of print-based work and really trying to sort of become a photographic artist in a way, rather than just sort of someone that kind of documents everything, or photography just for the point of selling something, or selling a band or a person or something like that. So I'm really I'm really proud of this work, and I think it's something that I'm going to try and work on for a while. I don't know whether it will stay being in just America, or if it will move on to sort of different places around the world or different cultures. But I hadn't done a solo exhibition since 2011, and so this was a exhibition that I just had. I did it at Doomed. I didn't really want to do it at Doomed because I was like, I work here and I do it. It's kind of easy, but it just was like I know how to do the space, and like I hadn't done a show in a while, so I was like, I'll do it here. I know that hopefully some people will come, and also I don't have to hire a space. You know, I can do it for free. But this work was a kind of an extension of that first series, and the idea of this was to document America in a way that if Americans weren't there. So it's kind of what they had left behind, whether it's like the roads that they'd built or the cars that they kind of had left in the world and the architecture, and looking at places like national parks and sort of the open landscape and how they've kind of built into that. And then, if people had just kind of disappeared. So this series involved, no people at all. And the first part of it, I would just sort of walk the streets of LA. And LA is kind of an interesting city because everyone drives, and the only people that walk are lost tourists or insane people. So it's kind of weird how you have these kind of points of like either a coffee shop or a whatever, but there's like, a good sort of mile or 2 miles in between that you just kind of have this no man's land. And that's what I thought was kind of interesting about America, it being so big that, I mean, unlike kind of the East Coast and New York and stuff where you're always surrounded by people, LA is kind of, even though there's thousands of cars driving by, when you're on the street, there's not really anyone to kind of talk to or relate to in any way, apart from if they're trying to, rob you. So this is a kind of document of that, and what I did is I printed everything on different sort of types of paper. Everything's on like either metallic or kind of canvasy or just odd bits of paper that I found in print shops and kind of stationery shops. And this work is actually all shot digitally and then printed, rescanned, printed, and I really wanted to try and work on the photocopier like you would work in the darkroom, and like keep reprinting stuff and only adjusting the contrast and the brightness, and really playing with that and printing like lots of the same image until I kind of found the perfect one, and then I exhibited that one. So it wasn't like I then scanned that in and then made a print of that. I tried to do the actual kind of final print, and
does the colour come from the paper?
Yeah, so the colour's from the paper. So it's just printing onto coloured paper. And we're actually doing a collaboration with a fashion brand who are doing this on a series of T-shirts, but because every single one's kind of individual, because you can't really get the same with a photocopier, because you have all these lines and sort of tonal effects, you can't really get the same image twice. So everyone, like, I did these prints were going to be in editions of 5, but once I kind of made one and sold that one, I couldn't get it looking the same again. So I was like, it's going to be slightly different to the one that you saw like in the show. But that was kind of cool because it kind of made everything like one of one, really. But yeah, I was proud of this work, and it's definitely something that I'll probably keep expanding on. And I don't kind of want to be known as just like the photocopy guy who kind of does everything with photocopies, but I think like if you're gonna be, I think that's like, when you think of a good artist or a good photographer, that they're known for kind of one thing, and then you can kind of expand on that and kind of move into different pointers. So I think like it's definitely something that I'm gonna keep working on, especially keep making zines and stuff like that, so the work's always going to have this kind of Xerox and kind of lo-fi element to it.
So do you print out of print and then photocopy the print, or is it an electronic?
Yeah, so I print from the computer, print the images through the photocopier, and then I photocopy that again, and then I rescan that, and then print it again. And so
you do print through the photocopier?
Yeah, but it's just a black and white copy. It's just black toner, nothing else. So all the tones that you see are between just black and the paper. So there's no colour in it at all or anything. And
Some
yeah.
kind of silk printing, right? I mean, you know, also the strong contrast, the colors, and there's an element of almost like posterization in there. And sometimes you really are reminded a little bit like of Warhol's work.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, it really has this kind of intensity. It's really fantastic. I mean, what is really fantastic is I think that using the different colored papers, it's completely anti-digital. You know, now these days we use
Yeah,
filter, but that's completely excuse me, that's completely bypassed, right?
Yeah, I mean Warhol's definitely kind of a inspiration in terms of that work that he did, which was like the electric chair and stuff like that, all that kind of really like found image stuff, and that's why I did a lot of research when doing this into sort of found imagery and old American kind of photography. I don't know if I brought it with me, but I found all this great American woodsman imagery that was guys who would, you know, cut down those huge like redwood trees that are like the size of like 10 double-decker buses, but then the whole town would come out and have a picture taken once the tree had been cut down to kind of celebrate it. So I made this zine that was all kind of the found imagery of that, and I've really got into doing more kind of found image based publications. I've just done one on sinkholes, which is a collection of sinkhole imagery from all around the world, and then I've like re-xeroxed and re-scanned it and re-xeroxed, so you kind of get these landscapes and then there's just dark mass in the middle where the kind of the hole is, and so that's kind of where the work's kind of progressing into, and I really want to start doing more kind of, whether it's like print based stuff in terms of like painting or screen printing, and just kind of evolving the photography in that kind of way, and then also I just have kind of small projects that I just shoot sort of personally. This one's all like trees in London from 2014 to 2016. So I always kind of try and keep these like small little projects running alongside kind of bigger things, just to kind of keep photography fresh and interesting. But yeah, I don't know what time we're on. But
we're very good, sweetie.
Yeah.
For the question, how did the working on Photocopy Club, you know, dealing with so many images, yeah, that must have a certain effect on your, let's say, creativity, I guess, on how you see photography, what sort of themes you're interested in, yeah. Can you describe like how that has kind of affected your own, creative work? I mean, were you maybe even kind of stunned, I could imagine, like, you know, when you're dealing with so many photographs and you've probably seen a lot of great work, was it easy for you?
Yeah, I tried to, I don't know if I really can be, if like a professional curator was here, I don't know if I would really stand like high enough next to him, because I'm so, the imagery that I choose for Photocopy Club just has to jump out straight away. It's like really quick process. There's no dwelling on whether this fits or this can go here or something like that. When I do a show, I literally just like had everything out on the floor as like just filling the floor, and then I'm just like going through it, and as soon as one grabs me, it goes on the wall. And then once that kind of, the structure of that starts to build, that's when I maybe be like, oh, that doesn't quite fit there and that can move here and stuff like that. But I really don't take too much time in considering whether it's, you know, if it really fits or what's the in-depth of that image and does it kind of really work. It's very instant, and it's kind of in a similar way of when I used to do We Are Lucky and do like a blog. I'd literally just, you know, I'd be sort of scouring the internet and it would just be stuff that I just, you know, would grab out and just be like, yes, that's kind of it. So it's never sort of too in depth, and I try and do that with my photography as well. I don't try and focus on stuff for too long, because otherwise it will just bog me down and I would never put it out. You know, it's just sometimes you can look at for too long and you never release it. And it was similar with that Xerox American Geography stuff. I was like, maybe I should make this bigger. Maybe I should kind of keep, you know, because I've been doing it for like 2 years, kind of shooting that stuff, 2-3 years. And I was like, maybe I should make it longer, maybe, because you always have these photographers who are like, yeah, I've been working on this thing for like 10 years and stuff. I was just like, nah, man, I couldn't. I couldn't wait that long, so everything was pretty instant with how it kind of comes out. And that's what I kind of like about photography. It's quick.
It has something of a sketch, right? I mean, no, like this is, it's instinctive, it's spontaneous.
Yeah.
It has the roughness of a sketch too. The could you? I mean, I'm sure you're already kind of thinking about what's next. Let's say like the last series of the of America without the Americans. I mean, that just looks really extremely strong. What have you planned afterwards?
Well, this is this is where I kind of fall into that crisis of confidence, where it's like you. I mean, I think it's the same for a lot of artists. It's kind of you kind of release this one thing, and then it's just this kind of struggle of if you overthink what your next thing is, then it probably won't happen. So I kind of just try and just like keep reading books and just looking at stuff, and then hopefully it's like with Photocopy Club. Like I wasn't sat really thinking like I have to come up with this thing. I was just like sat at home, and it just like, oh yeah, and then it just kind of like you just kind of did it. And the same with like certain. I just think that's kind of how it works. Like I don't try and really think too much about what's going to be next. So just keep taking pictures, and then hopefully something will kind of grow out of that.
Do you take inspirations from, let's say, for a new series from your recent series? Is there, let's say, like those one or two elements in there that you kind of spot and say like, wow, that could be now the starting point maybe for the next series? Is that kind of how you work?
Yeah, I mean, there's one, I didn't actually bring it with me, I don't think. I did this, I've been photographing like classic cars. Wherever I go, wherever I see like a nice kind of car, I'd take like a straight on kind of like side landscape portrait of it. So I just made a zine called Motors, which features cars from England and the States and some in South Africa. So there's definitely these small things that kind of pop out of bigger projects, whether it's like I featured like a couple of car images within that, and then I'm like, oh, actually, let's go back through the archive and see what other things. And there's a photographer called Ed Templeton who does a similar thing where he's kind of, does a lot of documentary work, and he's really good at labeling all his photography. So it's like, if there's someone eating an ice cream in it, there'll be a tag in it for ice cream, or there'll be someone has an umbrella. And then when someone says like, hey Ed, I want to make a zine with you, he's like, okay, let's make it on, dogs, and he'll just type in dogs, and it'll go through his archive, and it'll be like, oh, I have all these pictures of dogs. So I don't archive that way, because all my stuff's just in shoe boxes and kind of a mess. And I guess once you kind of, it'd be nice to kind of get it to that point where you can kind of in an image link it all to these bits and be able to find stuff really quickly. And I think that's a really interesting sort of way. But yeah, I kind of have to do it all from memory and think like, when did I see that car? Oh yeah, I took it in February sometime, and I have to try and go back through stuff. But I just keep shooting. I just keep trying to document stuff all the time, basically.
And sorry, I've got more questions. Do you also see like your work? You mentioned the internet, the digital world, which is kind of pristine, and you can create as many copies as you want, yeah. And there seems to be some form of a nostalgia, I think, to something that is kind of unique, that only exists once. Let's say like what you're doing with your photocopies. So each copy is a unique piece, basically. How do people relate to that? Do you see that maybe over the years people see your work in a different light, or is that consistent?
I don't know if they see it in a different light. I've always been attached to that that old kind of, like, from that old like punk posters and stuff like that. Everything's very like raw and very much like when you see like a picture of an old, it's like scanned in, and there's tape and there's tears and there's all that kind of thing. So I've always had I've always been interested in that kind of thing, in the way that I look at like American road trips. I kind of, look back at that past time of, just getting in the car and going off and like not having to have your phone and all that kind of stuff. Like that stuff does like inspire me, and it does play into the work, but I don't. I'm just trying to find. I just want to try and find new ways to show stuff, but still kind of using an old. I don't want to just produce stuff that people have that's just being done and done again. I guess like Wolfgang Tillmans is someone who's maybe like used a lot of Xerox stuff in his work and experiments a lot with like paper types and that kind of thing. And so I kind of, with my work, I kind of take some inspiration from that, of trying to make stuff very much an object rather than it just being living in a digital world or being on screen. I kind of like everything to be able to be touched. And I guess that kind of goes back to old stuff. But I just think it stays in your brain longer. Like you'll remember an image longer if it's printed and you can hold it than it will if you see it on your phone or on Instagram or on the internet or something. It's like family albums that you had as a kid. You kind of remember all of those more than you remember stuff that you looked at on Instagram today.
And the smell as well.
The smell, yeah, everything about like the toner coming off on your fingers and like, those old albums that just smell like dust. Yeah, that's what I kind of like about it. And finding like new ways to kind of bind things and print things and that kind of thing.
Do you work with graphic designers, or is that all your design?
Yeah, it's all me. And this is kind of what I want to do with Photocopy Club next year. I kind of want to try and expand it into being something that I can kind of turn into more of a full-time thing, whether it's like designing stuff for people or doing workshops and talks and exhibitions, and trying to make that more of a full kind of time process, rather than kind of having lots of different things that I do. And maybe just try and focus on one thing and see how far I can kind of take it when you kind of put full effort into stuff.
Can you talk a little bit about the way of marketing, or I don't know, do you market them somehow, or how do people actually get a zine? Do they just meet you?
Yes, well, so all the stuff that I make, we have like an online shop, so we've got a Depop and a website shop. And then we also do like book fairs. So we do the LA and the New York Art Book Fair, and then off print, which happens at the Tate once a year. And the fairs are the best kind of places to sell the stuff, because I think when people see it online, they can't really tell like too much about how kind of the detail and stuff and how it's kind of put together, and everything's like stitched on a sewing machine, and I like hand trim it all. And they're like really small editions. So everything's like an edition of like 50 or less. And so they're kind of the best ways. And then we have stuff in foils in the Photographer's Gallery bookshop. And we used to have stuff in Claire de Rune's. And then Village, which is up in Leeds and stuff like that. And some places in Japan and stuff as well. But like self-publishing and zines is like my world. Like I know lots of the people here, so everyone's kind of shares between each other, and I guess Instagram and stuff is a big helper for that, and ways that people share stuff that they've made. And it's very like the fairs are really fun because you can like trade a lot of stuff with people. So people that work at the fair will come around and be like, hey, I made this new zine, do you want to trade it for something or something? And that's kind of a nice way of like keeping the community together, and rather than everyone just in it. I mean, not that you make a lot of money in it, but like I like that people still are down to trade and swap stuff, and that's kind of a fun way.
Where in Poland did you have the exhibition?
We had it in Warsaw, in Łódź, and in Wrocław. Wrocław, yeah. Sorry, my Polish isn't too good. I kept calling Łódź Lodz for ages.
Cities.
Yeah. So they had like
Good
photography
place,
festivals.
Krakow, Gdańsk. Very big city is good for artists.
Yeah,
Krakow, it's like, you know, it's like Berlin, it's like London
yeah,
and Poland.
yeah. So yeah, there's really good photography festivals that happen
Excellent.
all the time there. So that was really fun to be part of that.
Sorry, I've got one more question. Really, with those photocopy machines, just it's a silly technical question. Do you have like different photocopy machines that you use, like different instruments?
I
Okay,
wish.
This one here
Yeah, no, I
has
wish.
this and that style, and this one here makes
One
those
day.
wicked stripes, and
Yeah.
this one is a bit more gritty or something. Or do you use one machine, or how
I
does
just
it
use one
work?
machine.
One machine.
Yeah. When I was
Some ancient.
no when I was 18, I made like a zine like this and sent it to this photographer called Valerie Phillips, who I really loved, and she became like my photography auntie, kind of, in a way. Like, I'd come up to London from Devon and come and see her, and she'd like tell me about the industry and like the do's and don'ts and the kind of stuff. And she's like this zine queen who has just been making zines for like ever. And I think I was like really broken. I was like, I just want to make more zines. She was like, look, I'll buy you a photocopier if you like make zines for me. Like when I need a zine done, like, you just do it. And I was like, hell yeah. So it's like a small thing. It wasn't like a huge amount of money, but it's just like a small black and white photocopier that goes under my desk. But it was kind of the best one that I could find for photography, and the toner's not too expensive if you get like one of those like the fake toners rather than a legit one. And it's just quite fun. Yeah, it's quite easy to experiment with. Like, most of the stuff that like, that one's been like recopied, but I don't know if I brought any that are just straight out of the copier. I think that one that you're holding there, the brown one, is just if it's straight out the copier, like not rescanned or redone. So it's pretty good quality, and I use like a recycled paper. But one day it'd be nice to be able to have a bunch of machines that I know, like, oh, this one does this and this one does that and stuff like that. I think that'd be pretty fun. But one day, we'll see. They're heavy and expensive.
I really love that one.
Thank you.
And I was just thinking, why is it that? Why do you think it works? It really kind of works. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like the aesthetic of how because like if I was just to show you all those images in their original like
Really
colour
the same.
format, they just didn't have the same
Is it the soft?
ring to it.
There's a sort of softness.
Yeah, it makes them kind of dreamy, I guess, maybe, and kind of, yeah, I don't know. I just really,
Yeah.
it just appeals to me so much. From just stuff like the photography and stuff that I'm into, like, I just like stuff looking slightly degraded, I guess. But once those images went into that format, yeah, it just gave them such like a different life.
I suppose it gives them quite a similar soft.
Yeah, like
feel.
attaches everything, I guess, yeah. And I always wanted to make, like, I always kind of, when I was doing portraiture and stuff, I always wanted to kind of make it, like, it's impossible really to make like the iconic image, because you can't really make something iconic. Other people have to make it iconic. But I was always trying to think of like, how can I make something feel like it's timeless and it's kind of doesn't sit anywhere within time. Like, it could have, those images could have been taken at any point. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to make something, that was timeless in a way.
Anyone else? Any questions? Good. Then thank you.